as a manufacturer, we can only work from home so much, especially if we want to keep the lights on and we want to keep everybody getting a paycheck. And so I know that the first thing that went through our minds, specifically as a manufacturer, is how do we keep our people safe? How do we make sure everybody stays on message and knows the right things to do and say? There's a lot of questions, especially at first. How do we avoid the rumor mill? And then how do we keep the lights on? How do we make sure that we can continue to operate safely, responsibly, and effectively? And it took a few days, I think, for everyone to kind of wrap their heads around exactly what that was going to mean. And Todd and Nate both mentioned this, and at this point, I feel like it's important for me to say, as a person running this webinar, Nate's not visible right now because it seems his webcam is not operational. So today it's just going to be one of those days, and that's okay. Todd and Nate brought up the idea of communication. And communication, I'm the communications director at KMC. So of course, communication is near and dear to my heart. So I think I'll get us started on this one, and then I'll pass it off in reverse order. We'll go Nate, Todd, and then Shrew as we chat about this. I know for us at KMC, immediately we wanted to start sending out community-wide communications, basically saying, this is what we know, these are the steps we're going to take, this is when you're going to hear your next message. So we wanted to make sure that communication was crystal clear from the very beginning. We wanted to make sure that we answered as many questions as we could as we started to communicate. And then what was very important was continuing the communication for us. We found that we had a positive impact by once a week, once every couple of weeks, sending out community-wide or company-wide emails that really discussed what it is we know, what we can expect, what are next steps, when you're going to hear from us again. And we laid out a very specific groundwork so that way we could keep the doors open and keep the lights on. Nate, what role did communications play for Tritium during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. We realized pretty early on, you saw it a lot on the consumer branding and things like that. There was a lot of messaging around, hey, this is a really difficult time, please buy our product. And internally, we discussed that a lot, and it was a priority for us just to make sure that we were going to be as flexible and agile as possible in helping our partners support, their businesses and their needs, regardless of whatever form that took. So we didn't want to be, just kind of messaging like, hey, we're here. We wanted to ask really valuable questions and see what we could do to help. And it's fantastic because within our network, we have really good relationships with all of our partners. A lot of them, are personal friends. So there was a very human element to all of that. You weren't calling on someone to ask them what the status of a project was. You were legitimately concerned about, their safety and their health and well-being and their families and their employees and those types of things. And that really led to, I think, in a lot of cases, we had closer communication with people, and we tried to not just communicate for the sake of communicating, but to make sure that we were actually sharing information and best practices and soliciting feedback every single day to do the right thing.
How did Gardner approach this, Todd?
Yeah, no, we're a part of our culture is that we're a very strongly independent and entrepreneurial company, and we really lived our mission, which is building mutually beneficial relationships with our clients and our associates. And so during that crazy time, and it continues, transparency from all the way through the organization, making sure that all our associates and our clients understood what we were thinking and the decisions we were making and the things that we were doing to ensure their safety and to ensure that that we all had jobs to come to was critical. And so our team, our marketing team, and our leadership really did a great job using all kinds of technology, like the one we're on today, to do it. I think the key thing, though, was that I think everybody on this call probably started getting those emails every single day, and to the point we were just completely inundated with it. I know personally, I just started erasing about 90% of them after a month or two. So those became useless. So we started using other technology, videos, other things to communicate with our people beyond just email, to ensure that they were reaching out, they were seeing what we were doing, and they could understand where we're going every day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I credit where credit's due, because, you know, Gardner's communication, their webinar series was kind of the impetus for us deciding to do a series of our own. So, I mean, absolutely saw that, you know, you walk that, you live that. And yes, absolutely. We have, at KMC, we use Microsoft Teams. And I don't think anyone in our organization had literally ever even opened the program before March. And then since then, we've had to kind of relearn, right? We've had to relearn how to communicate in that way, and how to use technology to the greatest benefit to everybody. Drew, how did Harrison approach communication during this time?
I have two ways to answer that question. And the first is, once we kind of came up with a plan, is how do we communicate that plan out? One of my technicians, his wife's a school teacher, and he came in after a safety training one time, gave me some feedback, and said, you know, to really have a good safety program, we need to see it, we need to hear it, and then they need, you know, we need to give them an opportunity to speak it. And so we took that and used it with our client's site safety plan, if you will. You know, we blew it out in email so they got to see it. Then we did meetings kind of like this one right here, where they had to see, hear it and see it. And then finally, we equipped all of our team leaders to do one-on-one coaching sessions so that they had to speak it. So that worked out really well for us. The other side to the communication, and you guys have all kind of talked about it a little bit, and we have a saying here that at Harrison Energy Partners, if you don't tell people what's going on, they're going to make it up, and it's going to be a lot worse than what's really happening. And certainly there, back in March and April, I was personally spending hours on the internet trying to figure out just how bad is this going to be. Are we going to have employees that we have to send home for months on end? Just, you know, what is reality and what is just clickbait on the internet, right? And so a lot of our employees were suffering. We pride ourselves on our tenure here, and we have a lot of employees that are close to retirement. And so a lot of our employees were suffering, and we worked hard to communicate with them in a way to let them know what we were learning as fast as we were possibly learning it. Let them know it's going to be okay, and letting them know it's not as bad here as it is in other places, and we need to count our blessings. So through communication, and through emails, webinars, and one-on-one coaching, we were effective at carrying out that message.
Yeah, I mean, you were not the only one alone in researching as much as possible, especially when all this stuff first started, because you're like, you know, that rumor mill. And when you're trying to find your stuff online, you kind of feel like a well-informed idiot sometimes. You're kind of like, wait, is any of this real? What am I reading right now? And
it was bad.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm going to bounce this right back to you. As we kind of started talking about, you know, these safety concerns, and everybody all of our attendees today are here because they want to learn about lessons learned. So having said that, what were, you know, obviously safety was and still is a concern and a priority. What were some of the specific things that Harrison did to keep yourself and your employees safe during the pandemic?
So it was kind of a 180. I mean, here at Cons and so many of the things that we pride ourselves on, we have connection with employees, connection with our clients. And all of a sudden, one of the first things we did to, anyone that could go home, we said go home. Anyone can work. And so we were very lucky that except for about 14 employees here in the office, everybody started working remotely. But our field team, they had to keep working when our customers needed us. And so we needed to be there for them. So one of the first things we did with our field team is say, first, don't come to the office. Quit coming to the office. If you get it from your child, you get it from the grocery store, and all of a sudden you walk through the office, then all of a sudden and you have it, all of a sudden we all have to go quarantine. And that's the one thing Harrison Energy Partners could not handle, is if we had an outbreak inside our own walls. That would have been devastating. So we started telling our employees, quit coming to the office. Next, quit drinking cups of coffee with our customers. That's against our core values. We always encourage our technicians to stop and listen, have empathy with our customers, learn what the real problems are, so we can develop solutions to take care of them. And so instead, call them when you get to the parking lot, and call them when you're leaving the parking lot. It became our new rule. Don't get your ticket signed. Number 3, get to the roof, get to the mechanical room. Stay there when you get there. That was, again, that's against our core values, but mechanical rooms are pretty COVID friendly. Rooftops are pretty COVID friendly. And so we developed that as one of our deals. Don't work in teams, work alone. Don't ride in trucks with each other. And if you do have to, we had a technician have to lift the pump up on a pad, so he needed 2 guys to do that. Neither one of them wore their mask, and one of them was one of our COVID scares about a week within that happening. So that was a painful lesson learned. Thankfully, we haven't had a single case of COVID yet. But in that situation, we hammered that story home to the rest of the field, to wear your PPE. And then take your lunch. That was another one that came from the field. We backed off of that one a little bit now that, some of the studies have come out. But there, for the beginning, we were talking to people, bring your lunch, bring your coffee so you don't have to go to the coffee pot as much, and get in your office, stay in your office type stuff.
And Todd, obviously Gardner is a very large integrator. And you have people out everywhere. What are some of these safety steps that Gardner took during the pandemic?
Yeah, it's very similar to what Drew talked about. We did those that could work from home. We did that right away. Importantly, though, I think a lot of us stayed as an essential business in the office. We felt that it was really important that those technicians that were going into hospitals and those integration folks that were going on to job sites knew that they were being supported in the field. So we had a lot of us that never missed a day. So I think that's not necessarily a safety thing, but more of a support thing. All of the PPE things that Drew talked about, we did. There was all the guidelines coming down from CDC that everybody on this webinar probably are aware of. So we did that. But I think the thing that we did, 2 things very specifically that I think that we did that I'm glad we focused on is we empowered our people, especially our technicians, to make the call. If they're walking on, and a lot of people probably saw the news, is they were walking on through a door at a hospital, or we had one of the largest areas, one of our clients where they had the largest death rate earlier on in COVID was a senior living facility, that if a tech was going in and wasn't comfortable with the situation, to stop, back out, and make a call to our safety coordinator. So we were empowering them to do that. The other thing is that safety, as just like Drew talked about, and I know that organization very well, is very critical. The stuff that our guys work on can hurt them and kill them. And so COVID, very concerning, but you still have fans, you still have power, you still have things. So we still made sure that our guys were aware of, hey, live in the moment and think about where you're at. Almost all accidents in our industry happens kind of on the way to something or from something, and not always right at the site, because people are starting to think ahead a little bit, or maybe now in this situation they're concerned, am I going to get COVID? And they're not thinking about the medium voltage chiller that they're working on. So continuing to focus on a culture of safety was critical beyond just COVID.
And Nate, same question to you.
Yeah, very, very similar to the prior responses. We started out taking proactive measures. People who were already remote, just making sure that they were not coming on premise, scheduling deep cleanings and things like that for the office. And then as the situation continued to deteriorate and we had states going into to lockdown and things like that, putting together that infrastructure to make sure that everybody could work from home. And then, in our facilities where some of our teammates were required to come in every day, in order to fulfill orders and things like that, we're really fortunate in that we already have quite a bit of space. So they were able to, just move some of the workstations a little bit further apart. We did a really nice job of making, PPE available. Again, being under the Honeywell umbrella, we had some access, to masks and gloves and other types of PPE. So it was a very quick pivot to figuring out who absolutely needs to come on-prem to do their job and who can work remotely. And a lot of those decisions were made very quickly and executed on really quickly. But to date, I don't know of a single person working for us that has had COVID either, but we have had some scares, right? There were certainly some people who had been on an airplane and then they were sick, or had just been in a meeting with 20 people, and things like that. So, but it's gone remarkably well considering how drastic the change has been just, in the last 100 days.
Absolutely. And I know that we did a lot of the same things that you guys have talked about. I mean, specifically, I know that I went out and bought a ton of masks. I bought about 200 masks, so that way everybody on the factory floor could have a mask. We had we brought in face shields, so that way if you can't wear a mask for whatever reason, we had a full face plastic see-through face shield. I know for some people that makes it a little bit easier to communicate because they feel like it's easier to communicate when you can see someone's mouth and face, their facial expressions. It's also a little bit easier to work, 8 hours a day in that. And obviously we did this social distancing and we increased cleanings and put hand sanitizer all over the building and wiped down all the surfaces. We did all that kind of stuff. And then obviously we're working from home. This is not KMC. This is my office at home. So I know that we all did a lot of that stuff during and still do it still now, but especially at the beginning of the pandemic. And then speaking of working from home, this obviously takes technology. I know I'm speaking on a microphone and to a camera to everyone out there, everyone who's attending the webinar and everyone who will attend the webinar. So speaking on that, what role, and this time let's throw it to Todd first. What role did technology play in your response to COVID?
Well, we had a couple different things. Obviously, like we're talking about the communication aspect of it, and making sure that all our folks that were working remotely, we could communicate with. One of the lessons learned is that we really didn't have a work from home policy, and we kind of were thrust into this. And so one of the things that we did is right away we wanted people to be safe, so everybody that could we sent home. We really didn't put any parameters around that, and our leaders, our managers, and that really didn't know how to manage people remotely. We're still kind of figuring that out, and so technology definitely helped us, just like we're doing now, to be able to communicate with them, to talk to them. But we're still going through that and trying to figure out exactly how to do that. The other thing, as far as technology goes, is we have a very vibrant data analytics business, and the ability to kind of remotely not only communicate and look at systems for our clients, but also to kind of troubleshoot that all the things that everybody's probably at least somewhat familiar with data analytics. That really allowed us to remain connected to those clients, still offer support for them without having to have the face-to-face interaction. And so that's a big thing. And then moving forward, obviously, with the help of all this, what you guys do, we're actively COVIDizing different control parameters and algorithms in our clients, looking at how we can better support them through different ventilation approaches and all those things to help out with their facilities.
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it any better. Obviously, part of what makes KMC tick is building automation. And of course, we've got an IoT platform, and this has been kind of one of those situations where we really feel like this is a great opportunity for us to talk about it. But then we have to kind of balance that with, okay, what's appropriate right now? Well, what does the industry really need right now? And really, what we need is to kind of come together as a community more than an industry and kind of share knowledge. And that's what we need right now. So that's kind of what we've been focusing on. And then, yeah, absolutely. I totally understand what you're saying. It's been kind of a learning experience to learn how to manage, different teams across disparate states. In my case, I've had to encourage my people to take some mental health breaks. I've got employees who have young children. Some of them, they're at home alone with their young children. And I know that I've got young kids myself. And sometimes when you're trying to manage those kids and still do work, it can be very stressful. And so it's been a learning experience to learn how do I manage these people as people and still set realistic expectations for work and still have goals that are achieved. And then how do we set goals and then surpass those goals? And, it's been one of those things where an increase in communication has made that possible. And being, flexible working hours and encouraging mental health breaks are all steps that I know that we've taken. Drew, how has Harrison, used technology in your response?
We got lucky here. The one thing you hear about Todd over there is they always make plans, and I'm surprised he hasn't mentioned how awesome of an emergency plan they had. We were the polar opposite. Once COVID came out, we were like, oh, thank God we didn't spend all the money on an emergency plan, because it never would have had a virus epidemic in it. And so, of course, we were being sarcastic with that. But when it comes to remote connectivity, we were there years ago. We were 100% paperless back in 2011, 100% electronic dispatch. Got to give a lot of credit to my teams here, both my T team, my service fulfillment team. They were the ones that drove that. Our dispatch software and our financial software company, I won't mention their name on here, but they did an outstanding job in helping us implement that. And of course, everyone here already has a cell phone. A lot of us have cell phones, tablets, VPN connectivity or connection. With our clients, we have access to over 200 clients remotely, of which we're up to 100 of those. Over 100 of those, we actually manage the data on that. So we're real proud about that. And then finally, for the ones of us that were still coming into office, like I said, we had about 14 of us that were core. Our IT department even came up with the idea of giving them a desktop at home. So our IT department went and found a bunch of old computers and started making computers, getting them back up to good health so that they could take it home. So if we had a COVID outbreak at the office, we could still function from home. So, yeah, we were pretty fortunate.
That's pretty awesome. I apologize, my headphones died there right in the middle, so I did miss a couple of words of what you said, but I caught most of it. Nate, quickly, how did Tridium use technology to approach this pandemic?
Yeah, so kind of like Drew was just saying, and Todd alluded to as well, as a software manufacturer, we obviously have the ability to connect remotely to sites all over the place. So from kind of a technical support and engineering support perspective, not a lot changed there, but probably the biggest shift that I have seen on the sales, marketing, customer service side, and even operations and training and things like that is we've created a lot of additional digital content. We've shifted to a lot more kind of shorter but higher impact types of Tridium talks and online lessons coming out of our training team. And then the video conferencing piece of it has been huge. I can count on one hand the number of times that I had a proper video conference in the last couple of years. And starting in March, almost overnight, that became the new normal. So for customer facing interactions, for internal meetings, it was really interesting and I think positive in some ways to have that type of kind of digital face-to-face interaction, because you get to see kind of a different side of people. You get to see how people work under different circumstances. And I think going forward that we'll do a lot more of that. I really, now that everybody's accustomed to it, I think even when we are back to, traveling at full scale and meeting face to face and those types of things, when we do something online, I think we will utilize video conferencing moving forward.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Honestly, I feel like so much of the country has become accustomed to this now that moving forward, this is almost going to be expected. If you're going to be meeting with someone who normally would be a 3-hour drive, I imagine pretty soon it's going to be pretty standard to say, well, can we just hop on, a video chat real quick and kind of accomplish the same thing without that travel. So I can definitely see that. I think that the next big digital transformation is probably going to be with shows and exhibits. I know that our show schedule this year was just decimated, and I haven't found anybody who's doing digital shows right yet. I think when somebody finally figures out how to do digital shows, that's going to be the next big push there. Speaking about technology. Now my next two questions are both kind of about remote work, but I feel like we've already spoken about remote work quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and skip those two questions. And instead, I think this is a good opportunity for us to talk about actually people and the things that we learned about people and about ourselves. I mean, we're all humans. We want to be empathetic during this time, especially during this time, but that's not always easy. And that's also can sometimes get in the way of business. So what are some of the people challenges that you faced during this pandemic, and how did you respond? Drew, let's start with you on this one.
I was really hoping you would go with someone first, but that's okay. I've been in some form of leadership now since 2007, and over the past 4 months now, I've never had a time that I just wanted to throw my hands up and scream, I don't have an answer. On one aspect, I would love just to shut it down. Everybody go home. I have a good friend. Actually, I have several friends up in New York City that are mechanical contractors. And one of them told an extremely heartfelt story about what it's like to be a mechanical contractor up there. And it was the stuff that hits you right here. So on one hand, you want to balance safety. And about that same time, we got the phone call from a hospital in Fort Smith that said, we want to turn an entire wing into a COVID wing. This is going to be something that's going to be good for our community. But for our first line workers, what can we do? What can you do to help protect them? So you can't tell them no. And so when you want to balance safety, yet balance taking care of your clients, that's definitely been the biggest frustration for me. So what we do in those situations, I already shared with you guys some of our safety steps that we use on client sites, but when we need to go above and beyond that, we sit down, we make a plan for that specific situation. And so we got the guy some additional PPE, no expenses spared type of deal. And so got him some additional PPE. We made a plan. His team leader worked with him one-on-one, and we executed. And today that hospital is ready to go. By the way, they're also a huge KMC customer, so that's a good thing.
Todd, I'm going to say pass the same question off to you. What were some of the people challenges that Gardner faced during this pandemic?
Yeah, no, kind of the same thing, or very similar. We had the remote, you touched on it before, but to making sure that our folks that were working remotely were still engaged and proficient. One thing that we did is the leadership. I know Bob Case, my mentor and predecessor, who is still here, and myself, and a lot of the leadership made sure that we talked and called our service techs, every one of them. There's over 100 people that are out in the field that really don't have an office that they're going to and all that, and that can get kind of lonely, especially when all of this is going on. So ensuring that they felt that they were supported, whether it's PPE or just somebody to talk to about their, what's going on with the company, I think that was really critical. One of the other things, and this is maybe an opportunity, is that our competitors in the market are really bad at managing and looking out for their people. A lot of our competitors are very large corporations, and as happens in a lot of very large corporations, they forget about people. And so we're looking at this right now, and let's face it, all we want is a way to be safe at work and be able to have a good job that we're proud of and to provide for our family. That's what all of us want. And when some of our competitors start taking that opportunity away or talking about taking that away, we're actively picking up the strongest talent in the market. So, as I told our team, Gardner's ahead, and as we start going, right now our competitors are kind of behind us. When we go into this COVID tunnel, which we're all in, when we come out, our competitors are going to say, wow, how did they get so far ahead? And that's exactly how, focusing on all people in the market, our associates and the new ones that we're picking up.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a good time to move. Too many people, I think, are probably sitting still, and I think that's a smart perspective to take. It's not one I've heard before, specific to the pandemic, I should say. Nate, what were some of the people challenges that Tridium faced during this time?
Our operational tempo was already pretty high ahead of time. It's pretty tough to find time on anyone's calendar, even pre-COVID. But I have to say that the pace of everything has actually escalated. And, early on, talking to a lot of our partners, people would voice concerns about, productivity and accountability and things like that. Am I going to have to worry about someone working from home and not getting things done on time or not being as detail oriented as they are in the office? And I've heard pretty much unanimously from our partners that, they're now really rethinking their businesses and the types of flexibility that they're going to allow for their people to have in terms of working remotely, even after the crisis is resolved, because in most cases there has been, zero negative impact to productivity. And in many cases, people are actually putting in a little bit of extra time. And I attribute that to kind of the sense of urgency that I think everybody shares. I mean, I've certainly seen that at Tridium, and I've seen that with a lot of our partners as well, that everybody wants to, kind of look out for one another and do a good job. And if they commit to something, that they're going to get it done, and they're going to get it done most typically on the, on the timeline that they've committed to. So I haven't had a lot of challenges, I would say, but just, kind of looking out for everybody's safety. And you mentioned earlier, Jason, the, mental health breaks and things like that. And one other comment that I'd like to make is I had posted kind of an invitation on LinkedIn, back at the end of March or the beginning of April, and I basically just said, hey, if you want to pick up the phone and call me just to talk, if you got a concern or you want to bounce an idea off me or anything like that, like I would invite people to call me in more of a personal context than a professional one. And I was really surprised over the next 3 or 4 weeks at how many times my phone rang and how many people just wanted to, in some cases maybe vent a little bit. In some cases they were looking for, exactly these types of insights. Hey, what are other people doing? What are you hearing? What are you seeing that that other partners are doing that are working, in terms of taking care of their people and things like that. But nobody, knew how to navigate this going into it. And I think when you look back at the way our industry and our community has responded, I think a lot of people have done some really amazing things. And I think that's something that a lot of us should be proud of. So hopefully we can just kind of keep our heads down and get through the rest of this and get things back on track as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought up a lot of great points there. But I guess I'm going to roll right into our next question here because we're pretty close to our time for questions. So Nate, I'm just going to throw this one right back at you since you're already kind of chatting. How does Tridium get back to work? How do you get back to work from this? I mean, we talked about, I think that's why most of our attendees are on the line today, is they want to see what other people are doing. They want to see what the big guys are doing. They want to see what's working. So right now, how does Tridium get back to work? Understanding that, COVID could be here for a while. It's not just going to leave. So what are your next steps here?
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of our office in Richmond, we're abiding by local guidelines and recommendations for safety there. So I know a lot of work has been done inside of the office, in terms of cleaning and sanitization, adding hand sanitizer stations, different places around the office, and cleaning wipes and things like that. They've also spread out people's workspaces and created one-way, aisleways between desks and those types of things. So they've taken a lot of precautions, and we're slowly. We've never been restricted from traveling or from going into one of our locations or anything like that, but we have been advised, not to unless absolutely necessary. So I think as things open back up, we're already starting to have limited engagements. Some of us have had face-to-face meetings with clients. Some of us have attended, people have shifted events. So, rather than, maybe having a half-day seminar in a conference room somewhere, they've turned it into a golf outing or something like that, where people are outdoors and, they can maintain a little bit more separation. So we're seeing those types of things open back up just a little bit. But the real question on our mind is just at what point, will an end user really want a lot of people back on site? If you talk about a hospital or a university, maybe as they're getting students back in, but at what point, are people really going to be open to, hey, let's have a meeting, in a conference room with 8 people? I think that we're still a little bit, a little ways away from that. So in the meantime, we're just going to kind of do a phased, getting people back into the office at a little bit lower capacity than usual, lots of protective measures for the people who are there. And then, just being really kind of calculated and vigilant in terms of what types of customer facing engagements we participate in.
Absolutely. I know that at KMC, and I'm sure this is going to be the same, much along the same lines as with Gardner and Harrison, is that we never really stopped. We just had to learn how to adjust. And we were very agile in it, and we adjusted very quickly, but we never really stopped working. And so now we're looking at how do we get back into the office, and is that really a priority? Because as great as technology is, it's nothing compared to the real thing. It's very different from me calling somebody up real quick than it is for me to just pop my head into somebody's office and do in 2 minutes what might take 6 emails. And so now at KMC, we're looking at each individual team leader and managers and department heads. We're all asked to, let's make a back to work strategy. What back to work strategy works for your team, for your department? And I know all of the department heads had to sit down and speak with their teams and say, okay, what works? Especially now, like locally in northern Indiana, in Elkhart County, where I live, the school system just came out and said that they're only going to allow students into the building 2 days a week when they open. So now we've got those same employees with young children, and they're going to have to figure out, what do we do the other 3 days? And so we've had to learn that our back to work strategy is a staggered approach. Some days we're going to try and we're trying to make it so that way whole teams aren't in the office at the same time. So that way we're trying to limit exposure. And if you have to have that face-to-face meeting, like you talked about, Nate, we've got face shields and face masks that are required. If you have to have a 6-person meeting, then face mask up and put your face shield on. Unfortunately, and that's just the reality of the situation we live in right now. But I don't want to speak for Gardner or Harrison, so I'm going to pass it off first to you, Todd, and then to you, Drew, and then we'll move on to questions. So Todd, take it away.
Yep, same thing. We never stopped working. We actually got back to work June 1st. We were able to bring people back into the office. As I said before, we're trying to figure out the best plan for folks to work remotely. We're going to have some kind of plan in place here shortly for that moving forward. But and so we felt, getting people back, a big part of Gardner is our culture. And how do you onboard new associates or the younger associates that just have started not too long ago to make sure that they really buy into that culture? And you really can't do that unless you're engaged with your coworkers. And so that's going to be a big part of that plan. The other thing, as far as getting back to work, especially with regards to our clients, is again, living that mission of building mutually beneficial relationships with our clients and associates. We are listening to our clients and becoming agile, offering cleaning services, all the UV filtration that everybody knows about, as well as the other technology. You mentioned it before at KMC about being agile. And then the last thing, and I think it's more of a morale thing, and again, the culture, is that the news that you see every night, and then our competitors, is a lot of doom and gloom. There's not a lot of optimism. I'd see our competitors' LinkedIn posts about it. We hope someday life will be normal and all of these things. And I get it. It's a pandemic. It's important, but it's also really important to celebrate wins. It's really important to enjoy when the team is successful. And so we make sure that on every one of our team calls, whether it's a service team lead talking to his team or from the executive level, we celebrate wins, good things, and like you said, Jason, this isn't going to end anytime in the near future. I hate to use the phrase new norm, but it kind of is. So the businesses that accept it, that protect their people, and excel at this, not tolerate it, will come out the other end better, and that's where Gardner will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I've heard that term thrown around way too many times, and it is what it is. And I think we're all sick of hearing it, but we all understand it. Drew, what about Harrison? How do you guys get back to work?
I'll be pretty quick here, and of course, you guys know my respect for the Gardner organization is just immense. They always beat us to everything, but for once, we may have actually beat them. And so I just looked through this whole thing, and there's not a single copyright on it, so that means it's public domain. So Jason and Liz, I'll make sure you guys get a copy of this. Anybody that's interested in seeing our return to office plan, it's a lot of the stuff that's from the CDC, but it's also specific to our industry and specific to offices our size. Yeah, hopefully it'll be useful for somebody out there. But anyway, there you go.
I'll take it too, Drew. I'll copy that.
You bet. You probably already have a copy of it, if I had to guess, our directors of HR. But I'll make sure you personally get a copy of it.
Thank you.
I think it's probably a good thing we don't have your email on the screen. Otherwise, you'd probably have about 50 emails right now. All right. So obviously, we've got the questions slide up. So for everyone who is still with us, I would encourage everyone, if you have any questions, please ask them now. We do have a few questions. Go ahead and get us started. So the first one is specific to Nate. What steps has Tridium and Honeywell taken to safely reopen offices and resume business? And it seems like we've kind of already touched on that, so I don't think you're going to have to jump into it too deeply.
Yeah, no, that is a good question. I mean, so the biggest one was just kind of figuring out, again, you know, who needs to be there and who can work remotely. And then as we bring everybody back into the office, you know, I really like Todd's comment about the culture and the collaboration. I mean, there just certainly is something about having people, you know, sitting together in a room and looking each other in the eye and having a discussion. And you know, Jason, you made the comment earlier too, just popping into somebody's office and sitting down, you know, and talking to them for 5 minutes sometimes can save 3 hours worth of emailing or scheduling a meeting, you know, at a later date. So I think everybody is genuinely interested and excited about getting back to that type of work. But what we're trying to look at, again, is just as people come back in, you know, we want to make sure that they have enough space. We want to make sure that they have access to PPE where it's needed. We want to make sure that they have access to, you know, cleaning supplies. And, you know, then again, just do the right thing. You know, if you wake up and you're not feeling well, or if you have a fever, I mean, for God's sake, stay home, you know. And I hope that that's something that maybe changes too. You know, work culture here, a lot of people try to gut it out, you know, and in the past, if they weren't feeling well, they'd say, oh, I'm fine, you know, it's just a cold, you know, and they'd still come to work. I hope going forward, you know, maybe we can cut down on sick leave overall if we get people to just, hey, if you're not feeling right, just take a sick day. That's what they're there for. So
Drew, I'm going to throw this one your way, and that is, what's your goal for a reoccupancy rate?
Well, I'm actually, and for the next 30 days, I'm also an employee of the state of Arkansas. And so the state of Arkansas, as you can imagine, has dedicated to hundreds of people to making return to work plans and stuff like that. And so the magic number that they have circled is 70%. And I don't know if we need to hit that here at HEP because we can work remotely so effectively. Like Todd said, we need to make sure our employees that are working remotely are being as productive as they would be in the office. But I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get above 50 for the rest of the year. So.
Wow. So now when you say 70%, and this is just to clarify, well, I always like to define terms very specifically. So when you say reoccupancy or you're 70%, you're talking about for HEP, Harrison Energy Partners, specifically for your building?
No, that was for the state of Arkansas employees. So I'm currently an employee of the state of Arkansas. I serve on a board that requires me to be an employee of the state of Arkansas. And so we're trying to shoot for 70% there, which is challenging because they don't have the space. They're going to have to separate cubicles. They're going to have to really clean common areas and stuff like that. I don't think at HEP, we're going to be somewhere between 40 to 60% reoccupancy because of our remote ability to work remotely.
Wow. Yeah, I understand that. I don't think that at KMC we're going to hit 100% reoccupancy anytime soon. Probably not this year. This year if we're lucky. I think this will probably be our last one. I'm going to throw it to Todd first, but I think everybody could probably speak to it, unfortunately. And that is, what mistakes did you make during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one, and I touched on it earlier, I think, is that when we initially sent everybody home to work remotely, we really didn't set up any guidelines on communication. We didn't train our leadership really on how to manage remotely. Really didn't understand how to measure effectiveness of our associates who were working remotely. And so what that led to, and we're still struggling with it, I struggle with it personally, is people are working remotely, aren't as effective as they should be, and so they should be in the office. And so it's really because we were ignorant of the way to handle it. So we've really spent a lot of time on that. And if we knew that going into it, that whole process would have been way more efficient. So that's probably the biggest thing.
And I think this is a good question for everybody. So actually, Nate, do you have anything to add for this one?
Yeah, I agree with Todd, and he started to use the word empowerment, and that's I would say the biggest mistake that I think I saw, and I'm not necessarily speaking just for Tridium, but just kind of in general, is I think we underestimated each other maybe, and I think Todd's right in that if people are a little bit more empowered, to just make decisions and do the right thing for for their partners, their customers, and the business that they work for, and just make a decision and move forward. I think that that's what really lends itself to those higher productivity levels. So yeah, if anything, I think we found that we didn't necessarily need to be as fearful about the lack of productivity, but just needing to have those systems in place and needing people to be empowered, to do their job like they own the business.
We're incredibly blessed here. We have not had our first first employee test positive for COVID yet. We know the day's coming, but we're doing everything we can to keep it from coming. We have had a lot of COVID scares. In fact, in some of our first COVID scares were not even first person, they were third person. And some of the overreactions that we had to those first COVID scares, were primarily driven by an immense amount of fear. And so some of our reactions to our first COVID scares were probably some of the regrets that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely understand that. I don't think we've had anybody at KMC actually test positive yet. We have had a couple of family members test positive, and of course, there's that scare, right? You have a family member test positive, and then everybody in the group needs to run out and get tested. I mean, and obviously that's just for safety, but of course, anybody who knows that individual suddenly is fearful. I think probably one of the challenges we faced and that we ended up overcoming with communication was assuming knowledge. We have these big meetings with department heads, and we sit down and we talk, and we come to a decision, and then suddenly we all have this aha moment, and we walk out. And because we were all in the room and we all talked and we all processed it, it's easy when you're talking to a team member or someone else who wasn't in the room, you assume that knowledge, that they somehow have this knowledge that you've all come to as a group without having been communicated with or to first. And so the way that we had approached that to fix that was to simply communicate and to increase that communication. Well, we got about 5 minutes left here. So before we sign off, I'd like to get some closing thoughts or statements from everybody. We each have we got 4 minutes here, so we each have about a minute and a half to wrap it up. So Drew, since we last heard from you, I'm going to go and toss it to you. What are your closing thoughts and statements?
Good. I'm glad I got a chance to talk about this. Real fast, we had an employee. He's a very, very emotionally intelligent employee. He had a family member that I will say was affected by COVID fatigue. And he had to go to the emergency room a couple of times and ultimately had to get more help than that. And then he was amazed to find out, I Googled this right before this webinar, that there's less than 2% of Americans have a tested case of COVID. But I'm going to argue that over 90% of us have COVID fatigue in some form or fashion, even if it's really mild or severe, especially those of us that are extroverts that had huge social networks that have been stripped down to nothing. And I'm not thinking about us necessarily because we're still coming to work. We're still interacting. I'm thinking about the ones of us that are staying at home. And so anyway, my plea to everybody is to be aware that this employee made it his personal mission inside HEP to let everybody know that COVID fatigue is for real and to get help. And so please, if you know of anyone that's suffering from it, don't ignore it. Thank you.
Yeah, 100, absolutely. Todd, what are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think really it's this isn't ending anytime soon. All of us that are working and providing, whether it's for our associates or for our families, need to accept that. Be smart as far as being safe and using PPE. If you're in a situation that you're not comfortable with, we talk about it all the time. Back up and make the call and do something else. And so take care of yourself, but then also celebrate wins. Operate as America is a wonderful country. We are a very, very strong country. We lead the world in. I know there's a lot of things today that to not be you see on the news that maybe shoots at that, but we feel very strongly that we wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And so take that American exceptionalism and apply it every day in each of our lives to be safe and to excel. Thanks.
I couldn't agree more. You're talking to a Marine, so it's near and dear to my heart. Nate, what are your closing thoughts?
Yeah, both excellent points, Drew and Todd. And the only thing I would add to that is just kind of extend that sentiment, throughout our network, right? To our partners, to our clients, to our end users, as well as our associates and employees. I mean, just be flexible. Everybody has had to respond to this crisis in a different way. A lot of people have had to make sacrifices. Some people have had to take time off work. Some people have had family members, that were sick, all those types of things. And, the fact is there's just a lot that we can't control. So, focus on what we can control. Like Todd said, celebrate those wins when you get them, and just try to keep doing the right thing and moving forward as much as possible.
Absolutely. Well, Drew, Todd, Nate, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And to everybody who's on the line right now, to everyone who's still attending, I'd like to thank each one of you, and to everyone who's joined us for all 8 of these webinars. Wow, congratulations. Thanks for joining us on this journey. There will be a recording of this webinar made available within the next 24 hours. It'll be free and available on YouTube. A link will be sent to everyone who registered for the event. And so if you have any friends or coworkers that you feel might benefit, I would encourage you to please share that link with them. And, from all of us at KMC, thank you so much for joining us. If you're looking for anything more, if you're one of our partners or system integrators and you would like something more, I would also encourage you to visit us on the web at kmccontrols.com. Check out our training section. We have been adding a lot to our online learning and our online training, a lot because of COVID. So I would encourage everyone to check that out. Drew, Todd, Nate, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts, giving us this time. It's been invaluable for me, and I know it's been invaluable for everyone on the line. So from all of us here, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone for joining us. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. See you guys. See you, Drew.